baby. Hi, honey. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I see it populating. That's pretty cool. That's nice.
Yeah, it just takes a little while for everyone kind of get in to be admitted in.
Okay.
So if we give them a minute. Okay, it looks like it's paused. I'd start now.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the South Whidbey School District Board of Education meeting. We are delighted to see so many folks here tonight. Before we go into our business items, I do want to give an overview of how the meetings are run, because I think we probably have some folks that maybe haven't been to one of the meetings before. First of all, we really, really appreciate all of you attending. And I know many of you that are in attendance had written letters to the board and the superintendent expressing their gratitude for the letter that was sent out on equity from our superintendent, Dr. Mocha. And I want to respond and let you know that the board, we all unanimously felt that your letters were truly inspiring and very heartfelt, and they were very much appreciated by everyone on this board. Also, that many, many specific and valuable suggestions were shared in your letter, and they will be given deep consideration as we move forward with this important issue. Dr. Mocha is going to be addressing it under her comments, under superintendent, and we will be also discussing it later on under board comments. But remember, for our district to make systemic or policy changes, the board first initiates a discussion, and that's what we plan to do this evening. Please know that your passion and your urgency did not fall on deaf ears. We will take steps for change, but at this moment in time, no one exactly knows what those steps are going to look like. We're dealing with the pandemic and getting school open and equity. Those are the focus items that our superintendent's going to be focusing on this summer. But we thank you for your patience as you move ahead. We want to get this right. Our students deserve it. We will go through our opening items first, action items, consent agenda. So we have some recognition and some business items before we begin the discussion at hand. And there is a chat box that you can post questions. We will try and get through as many of them as we can, but we can't promise if there's a long list of them that all of them will be answered this evening. If they're not answered this evening, you will receive a response to them at a later time from our superintendent or from the board, however the question is posed. So with that, do I have a motion to approve the the action items, the agenda, minutes, and approval of the agenda?
Move to approve.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The motion is carried. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Recognitions, Dr. Mocha.
Yes, I wanted to take a minute. I know that at the last meeting, Brooke eloquently honored Rachel Kaiser as a retiree, and she had the opportunity to be our Grand Marshal of the high school graduation parade, which she certainly appreciated that honor. And after the last meeting, we learned that Bruce and Kathy Callahan are retiring after many, many years in the district, teaching together. They're retiring together. So there are many, many Callahan kids in our district who are now adults who remember being a Callahan kid, and they always did extra special stuff for all of their kids every year. So we will miss them. and just want to wish them a happy retirement. We did provide all 3 of our retirees with a marble apple and, cards. But this year being what it is, we really didn't get an opportunity to celebrate our retirees. So just wanted to make sure we took a minute to stop our board meeting and honor them and say thank you for all their years of service.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the board? Certainly, the many, many gifts that kids in South Whidbey have by going to South Whidbey School District is enhanced by the wealth and the depth of teachers that work for the district. And Rachel Kaiser, Bruce and Kathy Callahan are right up there on the top of the list. And you're truly going to be missed, folks. Know that you're leaving a valuable legacy in the lives of many, many people, not only for students that you've had as in their classrooms, but also folks and their families, and the impact will be here forever. So thank you so much for what you've done. Okay, presentation, policy 6225, use of electronic signature.
So essentially this policy, Andrea, I don't know if you're jumping in, but this policy is to allow us to do what we've had to do, given that we're in a virtual environment, is allow for electronic signatures to take the place of our written signatures. So again, it's something that the superintendent was able to do based on your former, a policy that we passed a couple months ago to allow for that kind of thing during the pandemic. But we've been using electronic signature now, and we'd like to continue. So this policy is for that consideration.
I think that sums it up really well, Joe.
This is a final read, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. We have no items removed from the consent agenda. We have no unfinished business items for action. New business items, action. Memorandum 1920-46, approval to adopt new policy 6225, use of electronic signature. We just did that.
Yep.
All right. Memorandum 1920-47, approval of Bayview School roof replacement, summer of 2020. Do you have any comments on that or anything you want to share with us, Dr. Mocha? Or,
Well, that roof has been in need of replacement. JJ, our director of custodial and maintenance services, got the proper bids, and it's time to replace that roof. So this is on your agenda for consideration.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve memorandum 1920-47.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Number C, memorandum 19/2048, approval of the Chromebook one-to-one purchase. Dr. Mocha, you want to highlight
This,
for us?
yeah, you essentially approved the beginning of this meeting or two ago so that we can go one-to-one in the fall and every student can carry a Chromebook. It actually is really important right now so that we're not exchanging Chromebooks. This is a continuation of that process. So we haven't, this is the approval to make the purchase. We actually haven't, done anything on it on this level. So we have to have the funding for it. This is just getting it ready to go once the funding comes through. This is from the tech levy funding.
Okay. A motion to approve?
Move to approve memorandum 19/20-48.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion's carried. Memorandum D, 19/20-49, approval for the 300-gallon replacement hot water tank for South Whidbey High School. And where is that?
I'm going to let Dan field this one.
That's a whopping hot water heater.
Yes, it's in the kitchen at the high school. So it provides the hot water for the commercial kitchen we have in there. And yes, it's a very large hot water heater. It has failed and needs to be replaced.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's original to the building. I'm assuming it is, rather than being, something that was placed. So somewhere between 1982 and 1995 is when it was installed.
It sounds like it's lasted a long time.
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion
to approve?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Can I just ask Dan a quick question there, Julie?
Yeah, I'm
Under
sorry.
discussion.
I should have done that, Damien. Thank you. Discussion.
Hey, Dan, just out of curiosity, on this 300-gallon water heater, and I'm sorry I didn't ask you before to give you a heads up, but I'm just curious, how does this compare to other technologies from our energy upgrade? Like, for example, would a on-demand system, is it more expensive, less efficient, or, do we look at I'm sure we looked at other things. I'm just curious how it all panned out to choose this one.
I don't have the answer for that question, Damien. I'd have to refer to JJ and his research on it. So I really don't have the answer for you tonight.
Okay.
I do know we replaced a previous hot water heater, and being that it's commercial, the requirements make it much more expensive than if you're thinking about a residential system and how much it costs to replace those.
Right.
It is a much more expensive because of the UL listing that's required for commercial properties.
JJ just got admitted.
Commercial unit. That's what I was just curious if, and/or what other opportunities existed, or I was just curious, Dan. It's okay.
It
JJ
sounds like
actually
JJ's
is
here.
in the room. So we can have JJ answer the question.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The volume of water that our dishwashers run, it's quite the large volume that it takes so you have a constant hot water where the on demands can't keep up with that. And the other option is we're stuck with electric. We don't have gas or the other options to run more efficient.
So I'm not sure if you all heard that, but essentially we can't have gas because it's an electric water heater, and because of the volume needed, on demand wouldn't accommodate it. Is basically, I know the sound was kind of off, but so he did do that research, and this is his recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, JJ.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Dan, you get a new water heater. Thank you for doing that. All right, public comments.
So at this point, we have one comment in there, and I think we may get some more as we go along with our discussion, but I think you probably want to defer to that time, if that makes sense to the board.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to financial and enrollment reports. So folks, we're going to move comments and chat responses to board comments report and superintendent report areas. All right, Dan, thank you.
Yeah. Good evening to the board and to our participants tonight who are watching us from their homes. This is our financial report as of May 31st, which is 3/4 of the way through our fiscal year. And our fiscal year again runs September through August 31st. Next. So financially, we have received $16,102,134, which is roughly 76.6% of our funding for the year. So our funding is in line with our fiscal year. And you can see that it's very similar to our pattern from last year, other than the month of October, which was a levy collection month. We are actually about $246,000 fewer in our collection than we were this year at the particular time. Again, to be expected because our revenue projection for the year is actually less than it was last year. Next. So when you look at revenue, you can see that our local taxes, our local revenue from our buildings is about where we budgeted for the year. Our state general purpose and federal and state special purpose still have collections because we have 3 more months. And those are based upon student enrollment. And the state allocation model for OSPI has different percentages per month. So it's not an even dollar amount. We collect different amounts at different times. And the federal special purpose is reimbursements based upon our spending. So it's actually will be a month behind our actual expenditures because we have to claim it a year or a month later. You can see the bottom half is our 3-year comparison of our revenue. Our local is about the same. The local property taxes is going down. And again, that's a result of the McCleary decision and the reduction on local levies for school funding. State special purpose is an increase slightly this year, but a dramatic increase over 2 years ago. And again, it was a change from local levies to state funding. Next. And this is just a comparison. The other one was comparison to revenue and expenditures. This is our actual costs year to date, payroll costs, non-employee costs, and non-employee costs are going to be supplies, services, utilities, travel, everything that isn't related to payroll and the taxes that are related to it. You can see that the payroll costs year to date are about $13,267,000. The non-employee costs almost $2 million for a total of $15,251,077. What we're seeing in the expenditure side due to the closure is that our costs are actually a little less. The payroll costs at about 72.7%, down from that 76% that we would normally see. And that's predominantly due to the fact that we don't have substitute costs, we don't have, leave days, all those things that we would normally see in a normal year. Even with that, we are still $284,000 higher than we were last year at this time, but less than we would anticipate. Also, the non-employee costs, the MSOCs, we're down about 200,000 from last year. Again, we're only about 61%. Normally, we would be in the high 60% range at this time. And again, not purchasing as many things for typical school, though we are purchasing things for the COVID aspect of it, personal protection equipment. But most of those costs are really things we're going to see in the coming year as we ramp up to a back to school model. So those haven't really started to hit in. There's some cleaning supplies and some things we've purchased in the current year, but really not much yet. And if you have questions, be sure and ask as we go along. The next screen is going to show our expenditures with encumbrances. And you'll see that with encumbrances, we are at about 95% of our budget. And that's where I think we will be. We have June, July, and August left. So I don't expect a big influx of expenditures. Most of the other purchase orders we are doing currently are for the 2021 school year. So therefore going back in September and, buildings gearing up for that. We'll continue to have expenditures over the summer for transportation, maintenance, custodial, and a little bit of food service as we wrap things up in the month of July. But you can see that payroll is about 97%. The non-employee costs are roughly about 84% currently. You can also see that the expenditures started the first half of the year higher than the previous year. And once we hit March, started to lower a little bit because of the closure to be very similar to where we were last year in our expenditures. Next. So our general fund balance, and I give you two perspectives on this. The first is how much, and that's currently $3.1 million. Which if you look at that alone, you think that that is, higher than normal. But the reality is it's right in line with previous years because it's a percentage of our expenditures. So as our expenditures increase, we need a larger fund balance to cover a month or two, whatever our expenditure amount is that we expect to be able to cover by fund balance. And for those that are watching, fund balance is basically like your savings account that you have at home. It's for your unexpected expenditures, things that you don't budget for. And in our case, it's things like shortage of pay from the state of Washington. Every few years, they will have a month, and it's typically in June, when we are at the end of a state budget cycle and they don't have enough funding to provide the entire amount that a school district is entitled to based upon enrollment. Or it's things like emergencies that occur that we don't plan for in our budget process. So that's the reason for the fund balance. And you can see percentage-wise, we're at 14.6. The last 5 years, we've ranged from 12.2 to 15.2. So we're in the middle of that range of fund balance. Next. So a budget status report. This breaks down our revenue and our expenditures by category. And you can see that we receive funds from our local property taxes. By May, we have normally received most of the taxes that we're going to receive through the year. There is always some that trickle in for those that are late paying for property taxes predominantly. The local non-support is money generated in the buildings. We expect it to start wrapping up by the end of May because school ends at the end of June and there's not a lot of revenue that comes in after that fact other than rental income. And then our state apportionment and our federal apportionment money comes in throughout the summer. It's over a 12-month period. It has nothing to do with the school term. It's a fiscal year funding method. And again, so we're about 16.1 million. We anticipate about 4.9 million will continue to come in, most of that being state and federal funding. The one that says other agencies that have no funding for the year, that was a capacity for a grant that we were expecting or that we had last year and we didn't know if we were going to receive from Island County, and we didn't. So, but there's no expenditure tied to it. So anytime you see, those other categories, they're normally a revenue expenditure neutral. If we don't get the revenue, we don't have the expenditure. The breakdown on the bottom is the expenditure aspect. And you can see that in our basic ed or regular instruction, we have spent 8.3 million. We have about 2.6 million encumbered, and that's going to be things like salaries, benefits, purchase orders that we have out for purchases that we have not received the actual goods for. Special education, we have spent about 2.1 million, about 800,000 encumbered, and so a little bit less than 3 million. And you're going to see that in most categories, we are going to be under our budget estimate. The only ones that actually go over, and you'll see like vocational ed, that's the CTE program at the high school. They will most likely not go over budget because of the encumbrances. As I look at those, there's purchase orders that may not be fulfilled for things that were not actually purchased. And then the grant programs are the compensatory, and those quite often, if you look at the bottom line for those two combined, because sometimes there'll be money that is actually moved from one category to another. A great example is special education. Special education has funding and expenditures under special education instruction, and then also under compensatory ed instruction. That's the federal funding for special education. So if I take a salary for an employee and I split it at the beginning of the year, it may not be exactly accurate as we move through the year. So there is an adjustment at the end of the year. So I'm not worried about the ones that say they're 106, 112% over. It's an adjustment with basic education or special education for those particular ones. And then the one that says support services in the bottom, it's about 93.5%. That's your district-wide costs. So that's going to cover all your maintenance and, transportation and food service and all those big programs that are relatively wrapping up at this time of the year. So overall, we had budgeted almost $21.5 million in expenditures, and it looks like we're probably going to be closer to 20.5 million, or under 21 million for sure. So we're going to be under our fund balance, and the advantage of that, it's going to actually increase our fund balance from the current year from the projected amount, which is going to help us in our budget process for 2021. We have a higher starting balance, and we're going to have a reduction because, as we've talked about in the past, our revenue next year for various reasons, and as we talk about the budget on July 8th, we'll explain that, but the revenue is going to be less than the expenditures. And so even though we reduce expenditures, we're not going to be able to reduce them to the level of the revenue for the coming year. So we're going to be able to use some of this fund balance that we've created through this process. So that there is, as much as I hate to say it, there has been an upside to this pandemic from a financial standpoint. So we started the year about 2.3 million with our fund balance, currently a little over $3.1 million. Next. These are the 4 other funds that we budget for. Capital Projects Fund. We currently have in there approximately $1.5 million. So that's going to be technology, capital projects improvements, things like the boiler we just approved, etc. The debt service, the $81,000, there's a $79,000 payment that came due on June 1st, which you'll see next month, which will reduce this down to a couple $1,000s. And that's for the energy retrofits we did a few years ago. The Student Body Fund, which is funds generated by students and expended by students, has a little over $52,000 in it. And the Transportation Vehicle Fund, you see an expenditure there of $150,000. That was a purchase of a new school bus that came last month, and we paid for that. So we have an ending fund balance of $64,000. We will get a payment from the state of Washington for depreciation of $140,000 in August, which will bring that up over $200,000. And again, we'll be ordering another bus with that money. And next, I think we are just about at the end. That is where we are. So any questions I can answer for any of the school board members tonight?
As always, Dan, very thorough and complete, and we appreciate the great work you do.
Sure, thank you.
Are you going to do enrollment?
No, enrollment hasn't changed. We stopped reporting enrollment in March. And at that time, OSPI extrapolated our enrollment based upon our pattern last year. So if it increased or decreased in April, May, or June, they just used that algorithm to create our ending enrollment. So it's the same enrollment that we reported, last month. It isn't going to change because we haven't actually reported any enrollment numbers after school closed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to superintendent's report, because she has a lot to say this evening.
I do, and I want to let folks know I've been asked. We have 34 attendees, and none of us are panelists. So first, what I want to say to our community that's listening is that this format of webinar is really not conducive to the in-depth discussion that we really need to have on equity and inclusivity and diversity. But that being said, this is the board's meeting in public. So the first level of conversation is with the board. So I'm going to start with, we finished probably the most unusual spring I've ever had in my 34-year career. It was, as you know, we're in the midst of a deadly pandemic. And we also are hearing that it's beginning to surge again. So that remains on our minds. Every day, including today, I receive updates on the possibilities for moving forward towards school opening. A week or two ago, it was, I think we can do face-to-face, and we're getting guidance on masks and so on. At this time, as of today, as of yesterday with Chris Rakedahl and today with the health department, it is no longer guidance. We are mandated that in the fall, unless it changes, but at this time we are mandated that we come back to school in the fall and everybody's masked. Those masks may look different for younger children than they do for adults and older children, or if it's a special needs program or a speech program, but everybody will have some kind of a face covering. And that we must have everybody socially distanced in their classrooms, and that we are going to have an online option. We're going to have a hybrid option for families, which means part online, part in school, and we're going to have face-to-face. And we're working on that. We have no definitive answers. So that is a huge undertaking to figure out how we're going to open schools safely in the fall and make it a robust educational program. So that is one prong of the work of the superintendent and administrative staff over the summer. The other thing we're facing is an unprecedented social change in our country, in our community. We embrace Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. We put that out there in a letter. We embrace the concept and the work that we have to do. Our district is committed to equity and inclusion and diversity. And the board and I did receive many letters supporting the work that we have been doing. There also is a heartfelt student letter that came to me along with a petition that last time I looked this afternoon was about 1,500 signatures. So we have many people passionate about the work that we're doing and want us to do more. They want us to do more in two distinct areas, the way I look at it. One area is, what are we teaching? What does our curriculum look like around people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, all people of color? What are we doing in our education around that? And the other piece is, how are we protecting our kids from racial slurs, from incidents, from all of the incidents that have been described to us that students are facing. So we have to move forward on both issues. We have to open school and we have to continue our equity work, which we started, as the board knows, in earnest 3 years ago. And I know board members are going to speak to how it started and where we're moving to. But we started with addressing curriculum and making sure that our curriculum policy, and I know Andrea is going to speak to that, addresses an equity lens. We addressed it by training many staff, 36 hours worth of training over several months of time. And this year, every month, we trained staff for at least an hour as a collective. So we've done work around staff. The logical next step is building level teams around equity that respond to the district level team. So that is where we're headed. Again, we have much more to do. And I'd like to make a couple of recommendations to the board. And then I can turn to comments because I know they're coming in. But I have two recommendations that I'd like us to think about, like the board to think about and give the superintendent direction around. Number one is I would suggest that you direct the superintendent to develop with Andrea, who is our policy person, an equity policy. There's a WSD policy, Washington State School Directors Association model policy. We have neighboring schools that have policy in place. But I think that we need to draft a policy for the board's consideration and discussion. And when you do policy, it is typical that you do 3 readings on that policy so that it gives the public opportunity to make comment on that policy. So that way we have an overarching direction around equity. The other thing that I think we should do is have the board under policy 4110, the board can create a task force, and it can design that task force to be inclusive of members of the community, for example, who represent people of color. We could have board members on it, no more than 2, obviously, administrative staff, students, community members, but that this task force has specific goals. And again, what I would suggest is that you give the superintendent the opportunity to draft something for you that you consider and tweak however you want as a board, the membership and the purpose and the outcomes that you're looking for from that task force. That really gets to the heart of having voice and having the opportunity for conversation with the community, because again, it's Zoom meetings and board meetings are not the only place we need to have conversation. So that's from me, what I see as the two-pronged approach. What I'd like to do is turn that way and take a look at some of our comments that have come in and see if, because people have definite feelings around this. And I want to call out Jackson Murphy, who wrote the letter to me and started the petition, because I give him a lot of credit. He's a sophomore at the high school, and his experiences and his recommendations are certainly to be considered. So I'm going to just glance over here. We have one comment that says, "Thank you for your response to the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm writing in support of the initiative written by your student, Jackson Murphy. His clear expression of what is needed is excellent." Another comment, "Students are listening and impact matters. While deep thoughts and heartfelt understanding of all letters is comforting, please talk about the plan of action regarding support of Black Lives Matter and passing an equity policy." And I think we just talked about that, or I just talked about that. "Is there signage for Black Lives Matters, LGBTQ, and Indigenous peoples planned to be put up?" That's a conversation we need to have. "I would like to know exactly how the district plans to address the hate speech in the future, as brought up in the petition that's circling. Doing nothing is not acceptable. And I would love to be part of any task force that's formed." Okay, so I'm going to go to the chat. I know this is for later during Joe's time. I'm entering it now so I can listen. "The ideas I'd like to hear discussed and how we are moving forward are getting an equity policy put in place, hiring more staff of color, required anti-racism training for all school staff, including our board. I'm thrilled teachers have done some, but their leaders should as well." And I'd like to comment that our leaders have. That's where the 36 hours of training has come in, and we're doing an hour a month with our staff. And we also have plans around hiring. We've certainly worked on our hiring policy to be more inclusive, but we can talk more about that. This is not going to be our only conversation. So I'm not trying to rush any of this. "I'd like to see a physical sign of support of Black Lives Matter, like a sign or a banner at the school. Also, a policy that equity is discussed at every board meeting. I'd like to know what policies you'll be putting in place immediately to address equity." Got a question about how many people are attending this meeting. We have 37 attendees now. This is a question about the fall. "What areas will be impacted if we should go to online school, not business as usual?" Not really sure what that's getting at, but we will have an array of options for our students. We have to really think about getting our kids back to school, because not being in school, the pandemic is a health crisis, and no doubt it's a deadly health crisis, but not being in school, to me personally, is creating a health crisis and a mental health crisis for our students. So we want to get our students back in school. We want to have a more robust online learning opportunity for students whose families don't feel like they can come back to school. And then there's probably going to be some kind of hybrid, because in the event, for example, we have a student who's positive or a teacher who's positive, and then people have to quarantine again for 14 days. We want their learning to be able to continue. So I'm speaking very quickly because I want to make sure I get all of the information out there. As board members, please stop me if you want more or I'm not being clear. Future kindergarten mama here. I have to go put a child to bed now. But my fingers are crossed that I can return and hear discussion about fall opening. Thank you for having these meetings available online. Very appreciated. We have a resource, blacklivesmatter@school.com, to consider. I read this comment about students are listening and impact matters. It was in both places. I'm interested in the implementation of restorative practices, restorative justice practices throughout our institutions in our community, including our schools. I would like to know very broadly at this point what, where, and when, and how restorative practices are being used for solving issues of harm caused within the district. I believe it was beginning to be practiced at least at the higher grades last year, and I'd like to know how it's going to be continued, increased, and implemented throughout the district. I believe that restorative justice will be a key part of creating more racially equitable environment in our schools for children. I couldn't agree more. We do have restorative practices in all of our schools. They start with, at the youngest grades, with classroom circles. Teachers do that. They have class meetings. And at the upper grades, we have a dedicated staff member who runs restorative circles basically every day as things occur, including issues around race and equity. So restorative circles, for folks who don't know, are essentially looking at the harm that was done and how to fix that harm, how to make it right. And students are brought in and they talk through issues and concerns. There's a protocol around it. I'm not really giving you the full picture, but to answer this question, we are using them, and we're using them K-12, and we believe very much in the philosophy behind using restorative practices.
Dr. Mocha, you could highlight the disciplinary decrease that we've had due to the restorative circles.
Thank you, Damien. That's true, because we do work with students to reduce discipline. That's absolutely true. When we've looked at our discipline over time, it has reduced. So thank you for bringing that up. The whole purpose behind restorative practice is to improve our culture, is to have kids be working together to solve problems. So it was suggested to us that we have a place on our website with more about that and more information. So we're certainly going to look at doing that, getting that communication out. Thank you for holding all of this together during COVID-19. And then Christy, is it possible to see this in speaker view? I'm not sure what that means, but Christy may know. Can people post their names like a roll call so attendees know who is here too, if they like? That would be, people are doing that. Okay. So we can see that in the chat who's here. A thank you to Jackson for your letter and petition. I appreciate your action. We have current committees that should be utilized. Let's not forget we have a communication committee, a para-education committee, or actually it's a special education committee, and other useful committees. We can do Zoom meetings to get the conversation started. I had submitted a letter to be read during the public input. This talks about one particular committee that needs to be utilized as soon as possible. If possible, I would think it would be great if you read Jackson's letter. Okay, Christy can probably pull that up on the screen, but we can probably get that done. Who is Andrea who would help develop the equity policy? Andrea is our policy board member. It is her responsibility to help us draft policy. Please use consultation from people who have expertise in equity policies when developing this. Of course we will. We use expertise in all policies that are developed and put in front of the board. And yes, we'll use examples from other districts.
Joe,
Andrea?
if I could just also add that I have a master's degree in policy studies focused on educational policy and social justice policy that was done in tandem with a cultural studies master program. So, well, yes, we should absolutely be looking at other groups, and I'll kind of say a little bit more in my comments about my thoughts around that. That's part of why I'm the policy person on the board.
Exactly. And please jump in, board members, because I'm kind of going quickly through this.
Would you like a glass of water?
Do I need one? A little seltzer. Let's see. I have concerns about the training led by people who've only had 36 hours of equity training, because I know that many of those people started as beginners. Deep change is difficult to facilitate, and I'm concerned about leaving that to beginners in understanding equity. Okay, appreciate the comment. We can certainly talk about that. More names. At the Cell Equity Committee, we had asked to estimate the cost of school-wide 3-day training on restorative practices. We had wondered if the community could raise funds to implement intensive training for all. Then COVID hit, and so that question is still hanging. Yeah, we have talked about that and COVID hit. You're absolutely right. But it is something that we are still looking to do. Out of curiosity, is the board taking training as well? We haven't done formal training for the board. We certainly, if the board would like us to look into having that for the board, we certainly can do that. So that's something to be discussed. More names. That's good news, Andrea. The comment came in. Okay. What are the challenges you are coming across while manifesting more equity at South Whidbey School District, and how can the school community best support as well as help with accountability to keep up the stride? Another good question. Challenges, it's heavy lifting. It's absolutely heavy lifting. But I've gotten through I've gotten through all the comments at this moment. I'm sure there'll be more, but I'd love for the board to chime in with comments based on what you heard from me and what I've read.
Well, I'd like to say that I'm delighted to remind everybody a few years ago that we started a program of putting student representatives on our school board. And when we did that, we didn't realize how beneficial it was going to be, because a few years back, we actually found that we have an equity and a diversity situation at South Whidbey High School. And I think we're actually ahead of the curve on this whole deal. And then Andrea comes along with her expertise in the background, and she actually jumps in and starts helping us out looking at curriculum with different diversity and equity involved. So congratulations to us as a board for having Andrea, and also for having that foresight to get some student reps on the board that helped us out. And Joe, you made that all come together, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Damien. I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about expand a little bit on what Damien said, and then also just kind of share some thoughts that I have that have just been rolling around in my head as we've received so many heartfelt letters of support. And I hope people know that we do not want your voices to go away, that we want to continue hearing from you. Part of what the student representatives brought to the board was an opportunity for us to engage in deeper discussions. And there's a blog that's put out by Heidi Schillinger. It's called Fakequity. And in it, she put a matrix that has always stuck with me in terms of when I think about policy or how to develop something. And what she talks about is the way that you genuinely dismantle systemic oppression, which is very different from just explicit or implicit bias, but the systemic oppression, which is what the board deals with, is you have to put people of color or people in the minority in a high degree of power, but also in a high degree of comfort. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to avoid people being the token speaker, or it allows people to be able to engage in a meaningful way where you can actually put the seat of control with the people who should be controlling it, rather than keeping it under the current system of oppression. And I say that because one of the things that we particularly did last year was we had students sit down and tell us what was going on. And we were very intentional about how we set that up so that we could, as much as possible, put them in a high degree of comfort and a high degree of power. And from there, the changes that resulted in it was shifts in the student handbooks most immediately at the high school level, and then also at the elementary level. It also has started numerous conversations across the board that we know we need to focus on certain areas. The other part that I want to bring up is 2 years ago, we looked at policy 2020, which is our curriculum adoption policy. And that was one where we sat down as a board and we really looked at how does this policy support culturally responsive instruction? And we looked at it through multiple lenses. So we looked at it through gender, race, ethnicity, social class, and the ELA adoption curriculum was going to be the first curriculum adoption that was going through this new policy. COVID has happened, and so we don't necessarily know where that is going to land just yet, but that is something that we are intentionally watching to see if that shifts and changes the conversations. And that's also a conversation we've been having as a board about whether or not we need to continue to reflect and look on it, because likely we will need to continue to look on and reflect on it. The last little bit of comment that I wanted to say is that this conversation is a good conversation. We do need to bring other perspectives of people's experiences to the table. And I also want to be mindful that our people of color have experienced generational trauma and are currently experiencing trauma. And we need to have these conversations. At no point am I saying that we should not have these conversations, but I want people asking for these conversations to truly be aware that these are hard conversations and they will likely bring out and expose our own personal biases. And so as we are hearing that you would like us to look at curriculum, I want you to keep that in the forefront, that history might sound different from what you were taught. And the books that we read might have concepts and topics that we are not necessarily comfortable reading, like with our children reading. And these are intentional and good conversations that we need to have. But I also want to be really clear that if the direction of the community is to ask the board to move in this direction, that we are mindful that that is a side effect that will help us move that dial to a better place.
Brooke or Charlie, comments?
No, I really like the comment earlier about equity training, Joe and Julie. So I think that's something that we really should look at. I do appreciate that comment.
I wrote something up earlier today, and Andrea covered a bunch of it, but I'm going to edit in real time a little bit as I go into this. First of all, I want to thank you to Dr. Moshe for the inspiring letter supporting Black Lives Matter, to South Woodby student Jackson Murphy for speaking a hard truth, to the community members who've shared their support in those letters, and to the other students and families of color who've shared the difficulties within the district. That's personal thank you from me. I know that I cannot and do not speak for the whole board, and I want to share this with the board also. I believe that we're on the right course, but that we have more to do. We have to do more. We have to listen to the voices of those who are saying something is wrong, and we have to believe them. I think we're doing this. More than that, we have to look at ourselves and see how we need to change for the better. By showing our support for Black Lives Matter, we show our support for our students, families, staff, and community members of color. We let them know that we hear them, are listening to them, and are behind them. By showing our support for Black Lives Matter, we echo and reinforce the voices of our students, staff, families, and community members who have stated their support for their friends and neighbors. By showing our support for Black Lives Matter, we address and confront white privilege, white supremacy, and white fragility to help create students who are, to quote our vision and mission statements, multiculturally engaged, active community members able to meet the challenges of our global society, and compassionate graduates prepared for a diverse and dynamic world. We cannot do that without speaking truth to privilege and to ourselves. And we cannot do this without taking action beyond our words. We've heard the voices of our students of color, of our parents, and of our community, and overwhelmingly they have stated their support for our stance, for the stance that Dr. Moshe put forward, that Black Lives Matter. More so, they've challenged us to do better, to not just say it, but to live it. Dr. Moshe, the board, and the district as a whole have made an excellent start with equity trainings for staff, public statements, curriculum policy changes, and other steps, but I believe we need to do more. We need to dedicate ourselves to making Southwood Beach School District not only a place that is not racist, but a place that is actively anti-racist. We need to search out qualified teachers and coaches of color who can provide role models and safe points of contact within the district for our students of color. We need to look at our curriculum, particularly in social studies and contemporary world problems, as we have begun to do, we need to continue to do, to ensure that we are not whitewashing history, current events, literature, and every other subject. As Andrea said, we need to look at our district policies. We need to continue to look at them. As Dr. Moshe suggested, we need to continue looking at them, particularly on non-discrimination, curriculum, diversity, and student and staff conduct, to see if they go far enough in helping to create an anti-racist learning environment in our school district. We need to examine our own implicit and explicit biases, as well as those of the people around us. We need to reach out to the experts. We need to be willing to tell our friends and neighbors when they are allowing their biases to get the best of them. And we need to be intentional about the choices we make and the strategies we employ. The district has begun this work, and we need to continue it. We need to listen, to learn, and to grow, because right now Black Lives matter, and they need to matter to all of us.
Thank you, Brooke. Well said. It seems to me that next steps for us then would be to ask the superintendent to draft an equity policy. Am I hearing that from the board?
Yes.
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 What might be a time? I know there are lots of them out there. They're wonderful examples as I've been looking at them online. But we need to have one that's a good fit for South Woodby. What would be a good timeline for that, Joe? And how do you anticipate doing that work? Because I know we've got some staff, including you, that need to take a couple of weeks off for some much needed rest. You might unmute yourself. Works better.
Yeah, well, I was letting you practice your lip reading. Andrea, do you think we could have a first draft by the July 20, whatever meeting that is?
Yeah.
I think we could. And the other thing that's rolling around in my head, and is that we have Erin Jones coming hopefully to speak in August. And she did a ton of work around this. And so what might be a really nice idea is to reach out to her and see if she would like to partner with us, and then we could have her visit be kind of our goal date.
That's actually an awesome idea. So Erin Jones, as many of you know, she is, she had run for the office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and that's how many people know her. But if you Google Erin Jones, she's got many, many YouTube videos out there that make it very obvious why she's an awesome speaker, and we're lucky to get her. But one of the things that she's committed to doing is no more one-offs, no more one and done. She is going to be working with us through the fall. So we'll have the opportunity for her voice as well. The training that we all took with Caprice Holland was amazing. And, it took us from some of us being beginners to farther along. But we're still in contact with Caprice. There are many, many opportunities for folks to help us. But yeah, I think that it would be great if we reached out to Erin. In terms of a timeline though, Julie, I think the board really needs to spend some time making sure that it's comfortable with this policy. So it would be a little out of order. You usually workshop a policy, but your next workshop is really too soon, and that's all about finance, and that's July 8th. So I think for the July business meeting, we could certainly put it on as a topic of discussion, and then there'll be an August workshop, and then hopefully we can adopt it at the business meeting in August so that we have it in place for September. I think that's probably reasonable, don't you think?
I agree. And the other thing I would ask is that it would be helpful to have people of color's voices on that policy. So if people have an interest in that, and if people would like to join that workshop, that would be helpful in us getting feedback for it.
Yeah.
You know, we will also reach out for feedback, but that is a way where people's voices could be heard.
So Christy, can you just give us the dates for those meetings so that I'm not guessing? The July business meeting and the August workshop meeting dates?
Yeah, the July business meeting is on July 22nd. The August, so we don't have our next calendar ready. We normally would just do a retreat in August. I think roughly around August 19th or 12th, we would do a retreat and a business meeting, but we can change that and do an August 12th workshop and then August 26th meeting.
Yeah, and we can fill in with the retreat around that. So
And
let's.
And anybody can be at a workshop. Like, you don't have to be invited, correct, Joe?
Yeah, workshops are public meetings where the board actually does not have business typically, and it's a more free flow conversation. So folks can have a lot more opportunity for input at that point. Okay, so
the other thing that we talked about also was policy 4110, the establishment of a board task force, and that would be more encompassing of this entire huge issue and making sure that it's carried out over a period of time rather than just the development of a policy. So I think that would be the purpose, from what I'm understanding them, would be to examine curriculum, prioritize some of the curriculum items that we think should be brought first by looking through the lens from people on the task force. I mean, what do you want to focus on first? History in the high school? I mean, where are you going to go with this? You'd have to have established membership, the purpose for it, and what is the voice of the task force. So my hearing support from the board to direct the superintendent then to develop under policy 4110 a board task force to deal with equity.
Yes.
It might not be the right term. You might want to call it.
and yeah, again, you don't have to take action tonight on either, right? I'll come back to you with a suggested outline for a task force, and we'll come back on the 24th with the task force outline and a policy draft.
Okay. That's an excellent.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Let me go back to our comments. Let's see. So glad you're hearing from Emmett. I got to go back to where I was.
I've been trying to answer some of them while we've been talking.
Oh, thank you. Okay, is it possible to talk about the curriculum requirements? Is it teacher choice or required to decolonize the curriculum? It's so curriculum in general, when we adopt curriculum, we start with teachers at the committee level, but it's the board that adopts curriculum, and there's a policy in place as to what we have to do to bring a curriculum to the board. So it's not just teacher choice. The curriculum is outlined, and then it's teacher choice as to how they address what's outlined in the curriculum. That makes sense. Thank you, Andrea, for addressing all that you did. I see Gwendy's comment again to please read her letter publicly. We'll get there. If we are to raise people of color to power and comfort, does that mean consideration of recruiting people of color, and what incentives would we offer? That's a great question. Qualified teachers. Again, I don't have answers for all these things tonight.
Can I speak a little bit to that, Joe?
Please.
So in that, it may be recruiting teachers of color or administrators of color. That's always a goal, but that can be limited to who applies for the position. What Heidi Schillinger talks about in that is if you don't have that representation within the system already. So like, for example, if you look at our school board, we don't necessarily have that representation, then you are actively going into those communities in a place where they are comfortable and in a place where they hold a high degree of power and engaging in that situation. So it's the difference between us reaching out to Erin and saying, hey, come to our meeting and come see what we're doing, and us going to where Erin is and doing what Erin does and engaging in that front. So yes, and because we can't control the hiring pool.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot of systemic oppression within that, but that you want, email me if you want to talk about that.
Okay, I'm trying to, I'm looking at my email to bring up the letter that I need to read to you because it was submitted as public comment. And then I also want to be able to read Jackson's letter. Let's see. Qualified teachers and coaches of color is so important. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Brooke, for your words. We need to hear them. Thank you, Brooke, for using anti-racism. So glad you'll be talking with Erin Jones. I vote for Jackson Murphy to be in the policy workshop. Are these workshops going to be for public input like they were before the pandemic? We need workshops open to the public input. Yeah, we're trying to get there. Yep. Are all of these meetings at 6 p.m.? No, they're actually at 6:30. All meetings start at 6:30. Thank you, Christy, for answering that. Conversation on race, radical community engagement, and inspired action. Yes, that is tomorrow. I've actually registered for that. It's from 2 to 3:30 right in Langley. There is a Zoom link for that. You need to register in advance, and somebody put the information in the chat. So if folks are interested, you can pick it up there. Okay, so the letter I'm going to read, this is from Gwendy Hastings to the board. I sent it already to the board, so you have this, but she wants it read in the record, so I will oblige. I wanted to make a public comment in regards to the para-education department. I'm thinking that she may mean the special education department, but she wrote para-education department. Just want to be clear. I reached out to my son's caseworker, and she reached out to my son's principal, who recommended me reaching out to the board. I have emailed and called everyone and haven't gotten very far. Please note, I refer to the special education department as the para-education department, since it is so broad and serves a variety of needs. My son receives services with the para-education department, and the para-education staff are amazing with him. With that said, unfortunately, during this epidemic, there has been many issues come up. As a para mom, as well as a para-education substitute, I know I'm not the only one experiencing these issues. The first issue is virtual learning has not been working for us at all. Luckily, I have been able to support the 8 Zooms a week for his virtual learning, but there are elements within that have been a huge issue and has impeded not only his learning, but has negatively affected him on the social and emotional level. One main issue is my son needs to be with other students when learning. They're at his level. He participates with his mainstream classroom Zoom, but has been pulling back in involvement because he sees he is not at the same level as the other students. This has been heartbreaking to watch as a parent. I have spoken with some of the para-education staff, and they have noticed that many of their students that they were working with prior to school closure have not been able to access the virtual learning for whatever reason. The main reason I have heard is many families who work outside the home and they can't support the virtual Zoom timeframes. As you can imagine, this has negatively impacted the students. The second issue is the communication with the paraeducation parents have been pretty much non-existent. I reached out to Jeff Fankhauser to get information about what the superintendent of the state was recommending for the para students going forward. He didn't get back to me with any information. Like I have had to do before, I reached out to PAVE, P-A-V-E is an acronym. Luckily, I was able to get some information, recommendations, as well as forms that I can use for my son's educational plan that the state released back in May. PAVE and I also discussed other options for delivering education during this pandemic now and in the fall. They said that the board of each district will be given guidelines based on what stage we are in to what options are for delivering education. When my son received services prior to the epidemic, it would be one-on-one or in groups of less than 4 or 5. My question to her was, is there an option for in-person learning for paraeducation students in the fall if we are at a stage that allows groups of 5 or less? Again, she said that would be up to the school board to decide. The third issue, which also falls under communication, is the fact that the only thing us paraeducation parents received is the survey like everyone else. Unfortunately, there was only one question pertaining to paraeducation students on the parent survey and only one question pertaining to paraeducation students in the student survey. I spoke with, she uses her son's name, so I will say it, Curtis's case manager, and asked that a letter be sent out to all families who have a student that receives services. In other words, please communicate to the families of the paraeducation students. We have roughly 150 students that have an IEP that doesn't include the students who are on 504. That's a good portion of our students in our district who got left out in the communication. I feel the paraeducation students have been forgotten when it comes to instruction, information, and assistance, and I know I'm not the only parent that feels this way. I sent many emails to Jeff Fankhauser about wanting the paraeducation families to be included in the conversation for what fall instruction would look like. I was one of the members of the paraeducation committee, and I asked him if we could meet as a committee to hear from individuals about their issues, concerns, and ideas for what the paraeducation could look like in the fall. Again, all I got was, I will let you know when the next meeting is. As you know, the committee is made up of staff, resources representatives, and parents. If the committee functioned properly, it could be a voice for all the paraeducation students. As PAVE pointed out, the state superintendent hasn't given much direction for what the education looks like in the fall, but the district needs to be communicating with the families of the paraeducation now. As you are aware, FAPE, that's free and appropriate public education, is in place to ensure all students get an education, not just the students that can access learning in a virtual setting. It needs to be equitable and appropriate for the individual student. There has been an email sent about extended school year in August, but that's the only communication that I'm aware of for the paraeducation students. Communication must start now, and we need to plan a plan A and a plan B because we don't know what the situation will be in the fall. With that said, not communicating and planning now will only end in repeating what we experienced in March. The staff and students had only 24 hours to pack up and go home. Do we want to repeat that fiasco? The conversation needs to be inclusive of all students, and one way this could be done is by workshops. I brought this up during the last board meeting. The epidemic stopped many things, but communication wasn't one of them. I urged the board to make it a priority to start and open the communication to everyone. Start making plan A and plan B now. Sincerely, Gwendy Hastings. I reached out to Gwendy, and she already thanked me for getting back to her and apologized for a lengthy email. She wrote it in a rush before an appointment earlier today. I reached out to Christy about how to do public comment, and she suggested emailing. Anyway, what I said to Gwendy is that she and I need to really talk because the board it's not really the avenue. We are planning to open school in the fall, and we are taking a break right now, and we will start planning in earnest in mid-July. And by the first week in August, we should have a plan together for how we're going to open school, and that includes our students with special needs. So I don't know if the board has any comment on that.
Just that I commend you for the fact that through this whole era, things are constantly changing, and it's been very difficult for us to stay abreast of all the changes. And so here we are a couple of months from opening school, as Andrea said, and if we think back 2 months ago, how things looked then. So I hope people understand that as things continue to change, we're trying to stay ahead of it, and we may fall a little bit behind. But I know that you're doing your best, and I appreciate that, Joe. And I sincerely feel bad for Gwendy's frustrations, and I hope that we can take care of all those issues that she brought forth.
Joe, I would just add that the special education conversation is not unique to South Whidbey. This is a conversation that is happening across the state and across the country. Currently, OSPI is accepting public comment. They released some guidance around special education for distance learning earlier today, and Glenda Gallo is looking for information about people's experiences. And so if families are wanting to voice what worked and what didn't work, that would be an avenue that they could choose to use.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the superintendent before we move to board comments and close our meeting?
Do you want me to finish out what's on?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so our ethnic studies class is being considered. All due respect, recruiting would mean we go out. People of color coming to us is probably unreasonable, and it would be up to us to change. In terms of what classes we offer, that is part of the curriculum adoption process. We haven't considered ethnic studies, but we haven't not considered it. We haven't gotten there yet. Thank you for your commitment to becoming an anti-racist school district. Thank you for reading the letter with the concerns about special education. If the statements are accurate, it concerns me that there's been so little communication from the director. It sounds like we will be reviewing ideas for an equity policy and task force at the July 24th meeting. That's great. Can we take the step of having a Black Lives Matter banner across Max Welton by the school for this summer? It would be an extremely supportive statement by our district. In response to recruitment, there are multiple methods that South Whidbey School District HR recruits new staff, including reaching out to the University of Washington Office of Student Diversity and Inclusion. Please review the letter from June 11th, 2020 from the superintendent. All of the letters emailed during the last 3 months are available to read on the district website. Are you still going to read Jackson's letter? Yeah, I will. Thank you for reading. From Gwendy, thank you for reading that. I hope other special ed families know they are not alone during this time. Okay. Another thank you to Brooke. I'd love to see the board get equity training as well. More accountability will come if school leaders are more educated in this area. Okay, now I'm going to do one last thing. I know we're all probably tired of hearing me read, but I do want to make sure I read Jackson's letter, which I just have to find. So does the board have any other comments while I'm pulling this letter up?
I have a request to review policy 4310 was made by someone in the community to the board, sent to us in an email. It is district relationships with law enforcement and other government agencies, and it speaks to the use of a school resource officer or an SRO. Dr. Mocha, you want to give us a little background on that?
Absolutely. So the board reviewed this policy back in February 2019 and confirmed it. I do want to speak to the issue of school resource officers. I'm beginning my 10th year in the district. We have never in the 10 years had a school resource officer in our district. We did have conversation about it back in the 2012, 2013 timeframe because the city of Langley, and at that time one of our school buildings was in the city of Langley. The city of Langley was trying to secure funding because a school resource officer is funded by the police agency, not by the district. They are placed through cooperation with the district, but typically the district doesn't fund them. So they were trying to get funding for that, and it never came. At the time, which was many years ago now, I did write a letter of support saying that we would certainly welcome a school resource officer at Langley Middle School. At this point, we have no intention of having a school resource officer. We've not had a school resource officer. And the policy doesn't suggest that we have one. It just suggests a relationship with law enforcement. And the board has many such policies. We do from time to time call on law enforcement in our schools. It seems like 100 years ago now, but back in October, we had a threat. We had people asking us why we didn't have school resource officers on our campus. So again, I wouldn't suggest that you change the policy, but that's really up to the board.
So does anyone wish to have this policy brought back for review? This was a request from someone in the community, and I said I would bring it to the board.
I think that since we don't have a SRO in the district, I think that the policy laid out in the policy laid out in the document is appropriate. It allows us to interface with law enforcement when necessary, both for incidents and also, for instance, the parade. And I think that that's important. I think that the policy as it stands seems to be a good one.
Great. Okay, then no further comments, and we will not be bringing this back for review until the next time it comes up. All right, Jody, have
Okay, I do. Dear Dr. Mocha, I am Jackson Murphy, a sophomore at South Whidbey High School. I'm writing to you because I believe that the education around Black history and hate speech are lacking in the school district. I am a member of the Black population. We are a minority in the South Whidbey School District, and all of us have dealt with racism. We should not have to deal with it at school or at all. In my limited experience with racism in school, it is not hate that causes it, but ignorance. I believe that teaching about hate speech and Black history will help stop the racism and ignorance that still stains the country. I was first called the N-word in 5th grade. I've been called it a number of times since then. As a young kid, I knew the word was bad, and it hurt me in a way that I had not felt before. At that time, I had not talked with my parents about racism yet. My parents had not thought I would experience this early in my life. I was called the N-word again in 6th grade and twice in 7th grade. My response was always, just don't say that word, and to walk away. I did not start really defending myself until 8th grade. That year, I heard the N-word at least once or twice a month. White boys thought it was okay for them to say the N-word if a Black person said it was okay. Even if this was true, the question should never have been asked. And if they were educated more on hate speech, they would know why it is not okay to say. And Black kids should not be put in the position to have to defend our race. Another time during that year, one of my classmates told me that he thought that Black people ran faster than white people because there was an extra bone in Black people's legs. All I could do was laugh. This is a difficult topic to talk about, but it is a conversation that we need to have. If people were more educated about the word, it would not be uttered in a school environment. In both 8th grade and 9th grade, I talked to my principal about these problems, and I did not see any action being taken to help me. Hate speech should not be treated like regular cussing. Another thing that we learn too little about in school is history involving Black people. The little we learn about Black history is sugar-coated or positive. We learn little about Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Rosa Parks, and other and parts where white people helped, like the Underground Railroad. We don't learn about slave trade or about the 12 million Africans who were taken from their homes and brought to the United States. We don't learn about how slaves were thrown off slave ships because they couldn't feed them. We don't talk about the hard parts of the civil rights movement. I want to learn about Rosewood. I want to learn about Tulsa, where for the first time the US bombed its own people. I want to know all that and more, and not have to research it myself. We've exaggerated the length of time that has passed since these events. It was not that long ago. The curriculum needs to change. I don't want to have to teach myself about the Black parts of American history. Even if we will learn a little more about some of this later in school, we should know a lot about this already. I want change, and I will demand it. I believe that education will help us prevent the ignorance that creates racism. Below is a link to a petition that was signed by my classmates that agree with me. And as I said earlier, I checked several hours ago and it was already up to 1,500 signatures. So I really want to applaud Jackson for taking the initiative. And he's right, we need to do more. And I believe what we talked about tonight is an awesome continuation of the work we started.
And let's hope that Jackson will join you with the task force. He would be a really, really valuable voice.
And I don't want to pressure the board in any way, and we have a policy around it. So I certainly, as one of you pointed out, could make the decision on a banner. I believe that we're hearing from people that they would like us to talk about that, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot. But it's come up more than once in the chat box. So I don't know if you want to have conversation about that.
What's your feeling, board?
By board policy, I think that's Joe's.
Yeah,
that's Joe's area.
that's right.
Then I'll let the board know, just so that you're aware, that we have the opportunity to have a banner. It was created for us at no cost. And I'm not going to say it right. So if Amanda, you're listening and can text me, can you tell me I believe it's Joe from Fine Balance, I think I have that right, is willing to make that banner. And I asked for them, if they were going to make that banner and we were going to display it, that it also have our vision and our mission on there. So expect to see it. I do have to say, I'm reluctant to put it across Max Welton, not because of any other reason other than we've had a lot of trouble with that and the banner getting flipped over. I think we should actually put it up on the fence in front of the high school if we're going to do it. But I know that's the superintendent's decision, and I'll deal with the logistics of that.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Okay. Anything else for our superintendent, or we're going to move to board comments? All right. Anybody have some ending statements? I have something I'm going to read to close the meeting, and I'll go last.
Yeah, I'll go first, Julie, if you don't mind. I don't know if John Patton's on, but I just wanted to.
He is.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just give a huge shout out and thank you to you, Joe, to John Patton, the entire staff and team that worked on the parade and the graduation ceremony, as well as, you know, the senior parents, Kimberly and Miss LaWarren. So I can't begin to tell you how amazing that parade was. I've gotten so much feedback on the parade. The ceremony was just amazing. I think from a logistics standpoint, a decoration standpoint, the coordination, it was just on point. And I've even heard from some parents that it was the best graduation they've ever attended. So John Patton, I know you're out there, a huge thank you. That's my first point on it. The second point I wanted to talk about was partnership, community partnership, right? And there was a plan in place for the graduation, and for whatever reason it had changed. And we got a lot of community feedback. And Joe, I know you and I were talking almost daily and sharing emails and feedback. And I really appreciate you pressing the pause button, listening to the community feedback. And not only that, but you know, I know Damien, we had talked about on the last board meeting the 2-car issue, you know, with multiple members of the families. I really appreciate the partnership of you listening to the community, and then putting a collective plan in place. And so overall, just a really good job, an amazing job. So nothing but positive feedback around the parade and graduation. So nice work.
Thank you.
Agreed 100%. It was an excellent event and demonstrated wonderful community coordination.
I'd like to chime in on that too, John, and I know that I sent you a thank you, but I'll say it publicly to you and Joe and your whole entire staff. That graduation was not like anything I had participated in before. So there were some good things that came from it, like the ability to visit with students prior to them actually going through and graduating. Sadly, we weren't able to hand them their diplomas, but you know, there might be some good things that we can take from this and use together for another graduation that combines the best of all things that we just went through, because you guys did a fabulous job and it was great. On a different note, I wanted to say that I look forward to moving forward with some of these issues that we're going to start addressing, because some of you may know I have a huge family, somewhere in the neighborhood of 68 nieces and nephews from first tier and second tier. And you can just imagine how much color there is throughout my whole entire family. And so and of course, even right down to the fact that I spent the summer, one summer as a youth in Yakutat, Alaska with the Clinkets. And so this is exciting for me. I look forward to the challenges that we're taking on and moving forward. And I think this is a good thing that Andrea is with us. And Andrea, I'm going to continue as I have, look to you for guidance. You've been awesome. So that's my board comments. Thanks.
Andrea?
I'm good.
Okay. I have a letter and I've put this together, so I hope you guys bear with me. It'll take me a couple of minutes to read it. But as some of you know, I'm a retired public school superintendent who moved from Southern California to Whidbey Island in 2007, where I thought I was going to enjoy my retirement. And in my career in education, now it's 46 years, I've worked at 4 different high schools, huge high schools, 1 middle school, and in 2 very, very large school districts, including Los Angeles Unified School District. I had the great fortune of working in Alhambra Unified School District for 24 years, where 95% of the students in that district were classified as non-white. That's where I was superintendent. The rich multicultural environment that I experienced in Alhambra shaped who I am, who I became as an educator, and shaped me both personally and professionally. And I believe that it is the moral compass that guides what I do today. I understand totally, and I enthusiastically support Black Lives Matter and the idea of anti-racism. There's no place for racism in our lives, and particularly in our public schools. I've been very moved by the dozens and dozens of letters of support that this board has received regarding a letter about this important issue from our superintendent, Dr. Mocha. And I want you to know that I truly, greatly value and respect your opinions. I'm in full support that the time is now for our school district, our community, and our country to make significant systemic changes. And I have 100% confidence that Dr. Mocha is the right person to lead the work for South Whidbey. That being said, I want to go back to my story. Please bear with me as I weave my thoughts together. That ideal retirement I thought I was going to have lasted only a short time, and I went back to work for Brandman University, teaching and mentoring young leaders as they worked on their doctorate degree in organizational leadership. I've also had the great opportunity to teach many of the core courses, including the diversity course, and chair student dissertations, all of which I enjoy very much. For the first few years that I worked for Brandman, I was able to juggle that retired life, my duties as a school board member, and my part-time work. But the pandemic has brought huge changes to the graduate program that I work in. And because I have experience, and because I have knowledge, and because I have the background, they've asked me to take on more student responsibilities for next term, which I am happily accepting. My professional life is about to change radically as I'm going to be doubling my student load this summer. I've been a member of the school board for over 5 years, and I've seen many positive changes during that time. I've also witnessed some very challenging times, and I observed firsthand how difficult changes can be successfully designed and implemented by working together. Leading any organization during turbulent times, whether it be a city, a school district, or our country, is indeed challenging and often very painful. I know that for true transformational change to occur, such as what's being described tonight by our community, you need resistance. We certainly have plenty of resistance in our current lives. It takes strong leaders who have persistence, moral courage, and grit to guide us through these turbulent times. I want to take a moment to express my appreciation to our superintendent, Joe Mocha, for the work she's done for the school district, and especially during these past few very, very difficult months. It takes a strong leader to stand up for the needs of children, to create a plan to meet those needs in short order. Dr. Mocha was not only the spokesperson for South Whidbey School District during the pandemic, she was a megaphone for the entire South End. Her frequent messages were factual, supportive, and full of hopeful inspiration for all of us at a time when it was very needed. Joe, her administrative staff, the teachers, classified staff, and our parents designed and implemented a previously unimagined system to deliver instruction to our students. Was it perfect? No, of course it wasn't. It was and still is under design, and we are also grateful to our teachers whose willingness to flex and adapt in these challenging circumstances for the good of our children was absolutely remarkable. I've often said that the teachers in South Whidbey School District are a cut above the fray, and I believe that now more than ever. The next steps for Joe and her team is to redesign the delivery of our instructional program for the upcoming school year. Another important task, as no one can predict the path that the pandemic's going to take 2 months from now. But in turbulent times, we forge ahead, and so she shall. In addition, changes need to be made that reflect the social changes we're currently experiencing. A thorough review of all district practices, policies, textbook, and curriculum will need to be conducted. The Board of Education and the superintendent will need to take a courageous stand and to implement true transformational change. It'll take time, commitment, and input from many. I've served this board and community for over 5 years, and I've enjoyed my experience as a board member immensely. But that, as I said earlier, my life is going to change very soon, and my service as a board member will end at the end of this July. I simply need to have more time for my work in addition to some human time to help me stay recharged. Our students deserve to have board members who can fully commit to their work, which at this time I cannot. That realization hit me square in the face this last month when I could not attend the senior awards event, the drive-in, or the graduation ceremony, both due to university scheduled webinars with students. My last word of advice and my hope is that this board actively seek out a new board member who can represent the diversity of South Whidbey. You really don't need another board member that looks like the 5 of us. Allow me to point out particularly to our audience tonight the recent student demographic data about our district from OSPI. We are 1.8% Asian, but a little under 1% Black, 7.3% Hispanic, 0.3% Pacific Islander, and 7.5% two or more races, for a total of just under 18% of our students who are identified as non-white. I challenge the board to walk the talk and find somebody who can give a different perspective to the very important work you're about to undertake while still maintaining a gender balance. As my seat is the at-large seat that ends in November of 2021, individuals who are registered voters and reside within the boundaries of the district are eligible to throw their hat in the ring for your consideration. So for those of you listening tonight, please encourage those individuals you know who can provide in those valuable life experiences that will help guide the board and the superintendent in this important time. It will be an appointment made by the board, so watch for information about how this process will unfold during this summer. If you want specifics about the vacancy and how it will be filled, look at the board website under Board Policies 1000 Series, Board of Directors, Procedures for Filling Vacancies, Board Policy 115P. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to serve this wonderful school district. It's been an honor to be part of this board. And I wish nothing but continued health and safety for the community. And with that, folks, our meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Good. I'm glad we're not adjourned, Julie, because I think you're leaving us speechless here and without the ability to have closure.
I think we're still live, just so you know, Damien.
Yeah, you're still recording, which is okay. I mean, that's a pretty daunting announcement.
But beautifully said.
We have a really great opportunity with the audience tonight. And so go find some people because they are out there, folks, and they need to be heard. Bring them in and let's do this.
Well, I think an advertisement in the paper definitely, along with a big thank you to you, is probably in order. But like I said, I'm speechless right now.
Hey, I'm here to help you guys. You know, this is not my first rodeo. I've been kicked around a lot in my experience. And I just can't give it my all, folks. You know that. I don't have time. As I said to the board, I'm sitting here in my garage with my pottery studio and a brand new wheel and a brand new kiln that I've hardly used. And I need to have some Julie time here in addition to the work for the students. That's really important.
So what you're saying, Julie,
with future leaders, these people are going to be CEOs and superintendents, and it's critical work that's being done with this university. It's transformational leadership at its best.
so what you're saying, Julie, is policy isn't your hobby? It brings me so much joy.
You guys are going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I mean, I've always said this. You know, I came into the district when things were floundering, and I looked at when I first moved here, and I looked at the record, and I thought, what the heck is with this school district? You know, and it was before Joe came in, and you had board members that were going in and out and in and out, and Joe came in and brought some stability, and the board changed, and it was great, and the changes have been fabulous, and it needs to continue that way. And adding some diversity to the board is a real critical point right now. So I'd hope that people that are out there are, the tom-toms are probably beating right now, so the announcement is there. Everybody's replaceable. But I'm always here to help you guys if you need it or you just need an ear. Just know that.
Well, you're leaving me feeling pretty sad right now.
Is that because you're vice president?
Hey, that thought crossed my mind too, but so did something about this color. Your hair doesn't look anything like mine, Julie.
It's all there and it's getting cut tomorrow after 4 months.
You know, Damien, I got a number you can call. We can fix all that.
So tell John Patton I still want a hoodie
2
sweatshirt.
hours, you're good.
Yeah, John already texted me his sadness, so.
I just want a hoodie sweatshirt from the Falcons, so he needs to tell me what I owe him. That's what I want.
All right. Well, we're going to miss you terribly. I know personally I'm going to miss your mentorship and your guidance. And, you know, I understand. I truly do. You know, you're doing a huge service to education by the work you're doing at Brandman, you know, changing leadership to what it needs to be. So I appreciate all of that work. But on a selfish note, your work here has been tremendous, and you bring a voice of reason to our district and years of experience. So it is a loss.
Oh, you guys are going to be good. You'll find somebody great, and you know, just go out there and rock it.
You're the only one who's done this job.
It was great. I loved it while I did it, but man, I wouldn't want to go back to it now.
Come on.